Are you looking for an experience that will grow your teenagers' faith, increase their leadership skills, and teach them the discernment to engage with the world all around them, all while taking them on the adventure of a lifetime? I mean, who isn't looking for that? If your teenager loves fun, adventure, and wants to grow in their faith and leadership this summer, then send them to Excel's Summer Leadership Camp. Excel's Summer Leadership Camp is a 12-day experience for passionate young leaders looking to discover God's truth, to discern wisely, and live wholeheartedly. Your teenager will embark on a transformative journey in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where they'll build lasting friendships in the context of community, embark on thrilling adventures like camping, rock climbing, whitewater rafting, and they will receive expert training and certifications in categories like CPR and wilderness first aid. Each aspect of the camp is woven together to help them learn to discover truth, to discern wisely, and take godly action in the context of real-life situations. To learn more or begin an application, go to theexcelcamp.org. That's theexcelcamp.org. Hurry, because summer is just around the corner.
So it's stressful in a concentrated kind of way. And then you come back here and just people are doing everything. There's all this stuff on the counter. You go here, you go there. You have to get in traffic. Every little thing is these constant little decisions you're making. And you realize how much our culture is driven by that when you've been out of it for a while. So I get easily stressed out about all the decisions that I have to make that don't seem particularly meaningful to me anymore. But
Welcome to the Reclamation Podcast, where our goal is to help busy people reclaim good practices for faith and life. Here's your host, Tony Meltenberger.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Reclamation Podcast. I'm Tony, and today I'm bringing you a conversation with Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel Terri Jones. Chaplain Jones recently returned from a deployment, and she shares with us some of the struggles, challenges, and difficulties in returning home. One of the things that you'll learn in our conversation today is she talks about how in the world that we live in the United States, it is so much more chaotic than the single-focused, mission-focused world of being deployed. She shares that, what it means to balance life and work, and a soldier as a mom, and so much more. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Terri Jones.
Terri, how the heck are you?
I'm great. It's so great to talk to you, Tony, and catch up and share about all God's doing in our lives.
Yeah, so tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you do, kind of, because you've got an interesting dynamic in your work life in terms of kids and family and Army, and you throw all that in there, and it looks like a kind of a soup sandwich sometimes, I bet.
It does. I live a very diverse life, I suppose. I'm an Army chaplain for my employment in ministry. I'm in the Army Reserve. So it's a pseudo part-time job. And then I have 3 beautiful daughters. I've been married 20 years. My husband is a United Methodist pastor. And we serve together. But I do have that common experience with a lot of mothers of balancing home life and work life and career and making all those sorts of decisions about how to set priorities and really make the choices that you feel are important for your own life, regardless of all the conversation going on around you.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you've been doing that. I mean, how long have you been in the Army Reserves now?
I've been in 21 years.
And you're a lieutenant colonel.
I am. This is my second long deployment. Both have been to the Middle East. So the first one was I was married, no kids. The second time around, I have 3 children I left behind, which was difficult, but they all rose to the occasion. My husband is my hero. He did the single daddy thing for 11 months. So
I've had the opportunity to meet your husband. He's a rock star, actually.
He is. Anyway, it was a big experience, and I pray we all got stronger and focused on the priorities, and as well as just to celebrate now the bonds that can last across time and space.
Yeah, when you say the bonds that can last across time and space, what do you mean about that more practically? And what does that look like?
Well, you have to learn how to communicate. I didn't get to see them for, nearly a year, and learning how to keep those bonds going, how to talk and share and still stay engaged in each other's lives. It's a test that a lot of people don't ever experience, but I think it has its pros and its cons. It's obviously difficult, not something you wish on anybody, but I feel like, my daughters have learned something about service, and they also have sacrificed for people that they don't know by giving up their mother for 11 months and taking on extra responsibilities at home, giving up on things. I get home, the house wasn't how I left it, but my daughters were loved.
That's
And
awesome. How old are your daughters?
they are 5, 9, and 12.
Yeah, so I mean, especially for the 5-year-old, that has to be really difficult for them to process. How did you guys approach that situation of saying, mommy's work is taking her away for a year?
Well, it was hard. I don't think the 5-year-old comprehended, how it is, but they were used to me going away for weekends and things like that. It was the hardest on the 12-year-old. And statistics show that in families, it's actually the hardest on teenagers. Little children, they don't, you're gone, you show up. They're a lot more resilient about that. But teenagers, even though they don't act like they want you in their life, they really do. And they have questions, and they're going through all this confusing time, and they rely on your presence, and even if you're just around. So I tried to, just send extra messages to my daughter that's 12, who started middle school, but she's doing well. And I hope over time we can continue those conversations about what she's learned, and hopefully on the back side of this, she can learn the confidence of someone who, even though we were separated, we still have that strong relationship. And how do you sustain through obstacles and hard times?
I really appreciate your intentionality about that, sending the extra messages, because I think that there are so many people out there who have work responsibilities that take them away, maybe not for a year, but take them away for long periods of time. So that intentional relationship building with those teenagers and pre-teenagers is got to be crucial. So you've been back now for a month. How's the reintegration been with the kids and the husband?
Well, there's certain things, I think every family is different. There's some things I like to do, none of them like to do. So I love to cook, and they've been really excited that I'm home and they can eat homemade food now.
That's awesome.
And then, other things we tried to be, ease into things. Don't just come in and take over. Just expect things to be how they were before. My husband is glad to not have all of the weight on his shoulders, but I think it was also, a letting go for him of all the schedules and being involved in the school and things like that. So we just tried to talk. It's all about talking and sharing and not making assumptions about people. That's just the bottom line for any relationship, I think, regardless of your situation. You just share how you feel and be able to have a non-defensive conversation.
I think a lot of our listeners would say that that's a really difficult task. I'm just laughing because of my own life. How would you, I mean, if you were going to give somebody some tactile, like your best practices on a non-defensive conversation, what would you say?
Well, you have to, I think people are different. So for me, I always have to remind myself to be patient. And, I'm a very, fix things, get things going, get going. My husband likes to think about things longer. So I have to be patient and give him time to process. And even though I feel like I've already know what I want to do, I have to wait for him. And the other side of that is sometimes I make mistakes because I'm in too big of a hurry, and he will catch that. So the more we can work as a team, it's better in the long run. And, I'm not perfect by any means about it, but, we've done this for 20 years now. So I got, I know what the, stressor points are, and it's just trying to, prepare yourself ahead of time. And he's very patient with me. And I've told him constantly, it's hard for me to get used to the chaotic life of the culture back home. When you're deployed, you have one job that you do for, 10, 12 hours a day. Pretty much that's all you think about is whatever your job is every day. You get very little time off. So it's stressful in a concentrated kind of way. And then you come back here and just people are doing everything. There's all this stuff on the counter. You go here, you go there. You have to get in traffic. Every little thing is these constant little decisions you're making. And you realize how much our culture is driven by that when you've been out of it for a while. So I get easily stressed out about all the decisions that I have to make that don't seem particularly meaningful to me anymore, but I'm sure I will assimilate soon.
Well, it's got to be such a challenge, right? You get over there and you're mission focused and everything is about the mission and everyone's working towards the same idea, hopefully at least. And then all of a sudden you come back and it's like, soccer is the most important thing and swimming is the most important thing and school is so there's all these different pockets of what would be the most important mission, so that's gotta be so challenging for assimilation purposes.
It is. It is a lot. And yes, everybody's priorities, they want it to be the most important. So it's a constant discipline to just be intentional, as you said before, about where am I going and what do I want to put my priority of effort on. And if you don't be intentional, the culture will drive you toward whatever's going on every single time, because everything's going so fast. And we don't really have built into our schedule time to reflect. And when you're busy, that feels stressful to stop because you have so much to do. But if you don't do that, you really easily get off track. And then you start to feel like, why, I can't get anything done. Why am I so stressed out all the time? And a lot of times it's just because we're misplacing all of our efforts.
I heard somebody say recently that the most productive thing that we can say is no.
It is. And or just to know how you're spending your time and but yeah, I'm trying to ease back in and be intentional about what I say yes to. Some things you can't get out of. You still have to be where
you still have to feed the kids no matter what. They always want to eat.
So to be simple where you can, and that's where I really have to take that time for myself to focus and get and I'm not always good at it either. But
now, are you more of a morning quiet time person or an evening quiet? How are you creating that space in your schedule? Because I know for me, if I have to get up early before my house turns into Crazyville, and then spend time in the Word, spend time in meditation and prayer, and then try to go to the gym all before the kids get really moving. What's your rhythm look like?
Well, I'm definitely a morning person too. My day goes better if I have that half hour before anybody else gets up to focus. We're not always good at it, but we've tried to do the exercise thing as a family. That way we're doing bonding time and
that sounds painful. I'm just going to be honest.
Well, we let them pick what exercise and we mix it up a lot.
Oh, that's good. That's good then. Yeah.
But that's all about priorities too. Where can I do 2 for 1 instead of, one thing? And everybody's individual about that.
So let's talk a little bit about your faith walk on your deployment. And you can talk about either deployment and how do you, because I think it's a unique thing when you get into a high stress environment. In a high stress environment, how do people dial in on their relationship with God? How do people follow God? How did you do it? How did you see other soldiers do it? Either time, either deployment, 04 or 18.
Well, when you're deployed, or if you go to some other country or environment, what you find is really an openness, a new perspective to see things in a different way, because you're not in the place that you're comfortable. Kuwait wasn't necessarily dangerous, but it's a harsh environment. It's super hot, it's super cold. I walked about a mile to work every day and back. There was so all of that changes how you see things, and I think making the opportunity to see that, and it's powerful to feel like I'm in the places where some of the patriarchs were, and to understand how it felt to be in that environment was very powerful to me. I also, things like walking to work, that's a very simple thing, but I found that it really changed my perspective for the day. So I would get up in the morning, pick a Bible verse for the day, and as I walked that mile sometimes I rode a bike, I thought and kind of reflected on it, because the first thing I would do every morning is go in with my general and her staff and say a prayer for the day together. It took 1 minute. It was short, but that time to reflect and start my day like that was a very small thing that really set that space for my day. The same thing coming back at night, I would kind of debrief on my way home, and walking is a very calming process. So I found that if I didn't do that for some reason, it was hard to sleep, and I kind of retained a lot of that stress inside. I actually miss some of that now that I'm home, and I notice there's no space between things. So I go from one thing, and then I get in a car, and you're driving, and you got to pay attention to all these people, and you don't realize how those small little stressors are building up, and there's no free space to just listen and hear and let things ruminate, and to be able to hear God in those spaces.
I love that. Creating margin by intentional actions. And if you've never been deployed before, that the interesting thing about that is the base, Camp Arifjan, where you were, is a huge base.
It is.
But not, most people don't have cars. And so in a lot of ways, it's like an intentional walking community. And so intentional community, intentional actions are really resonating with that theme of intentionality of the space of it all, that even in a fairly small space, because Arifjan is definitely smaller than the city that you live in now, I would guess.
Yeah.
Not geographically, but certainly in population. But the space that you were able to get seems like it was a lot bigger.
It was. And obviously I didn't make an intentional choice to walk to work. That was my situation. But I found in that a blessing. So seeing how God is opening opportunities, sometimes we have to not just complain, but see how that could actually be useful. I remember a few times too, we were researching some things, and I'd come home from work and I'd spent 8 hours staring at a computer, and I just couldn't read anymore. My eyes were so tired. And so I decided, when I'm like, well, I'm just going to listen. I have this app to listen to the Bible on Bible Gateway. And I really liked it. And I was like, I experience scripture differently when I hear it as opposed to read it. And so I think being open to we should all have intentional forms and discipline in our life, but sometimes we have to mix it up a little bit and, do something different than we're used to. I think sometimes we get so used to our forms, they stop being effective, because they just become something we do and check off a block instead of having new perspective brought in our life.
I love that. Sometimes we stop listening to our forms. Our forms stop being effective. Yeah, I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people. So what you're saying is that everyone should get deployed at least once.
Well, or go someplace you haven't been. Maybe you don't have to deploy. You could, go on a mission trip or do something like that. But.
No, it's good. I love it. Just, sometimes you got to get up and move and get a new perspective. It requires something different. So while you're over there and you're in this high stress environment and you're working 12, 14-hour days, walking a mile each way, how did you balance the fun part of your life? What did you guys do for fun? How'd you kind of work that in? I mean, because obviously as Lieutenant Colonel, you've got troops. I mean, you're a leader in charge of people.
Yeah, I don't know if we did so good in the fun department. But I know when I was deployed with you, it was a lot of fun. You always made me laugh, and we joked around a lot. And that was, still to this day, I look back at that as just one of the things that got me through some really hard experiences, to just laugh. And that simple thing created space and breathing room to, tackle the hard things. So I didn't really have that same experience this time, but all of that is very important, to have that community. Community also, I think we have to be disciplined in our personal life, but the best we're going to be is always in community. When we have somebody to do something with us, to point out our blind spots, because we are very prone to our own perspectives, and we're going to naturally do things the way we're comfortable. And I think community gets us out of that, as well as helps us through the hard times. So I'm a big proponent of worshiping with people, praying with people, sharing the Bible with people.
Now, how did you do that while you were deployed?
I think one of my favorite experiences was I led a chapel service with a Presbyterian chaplain. So I'm Methodist, he's Presbyterian. And
now explain for some of our listeners who may not know, what's the difference?
Well, I mean, it's not a lot, but they tend, Presbyterians are the Calvinistic side of things, and predestination, and God's sovereignty, and God's has everything kind of lined out. Methodists tend to be more free will and a lot more freedom of decision, and their theology, that's the theology. Practically speaking,
negligible.
Yeah, it's not that different.
So you're leading a chapel service with this Presbyterian chaplain.
Yes, and we just had a great relationships in terms of being able to just pick up where each other left off, because we would travel a lot. And but when we're there together, just one would preach one week and the other one would do all the other prayers or whatever else was happening in the service. And then afterwards we would really talk and share about the church, and how can the church itself, especially back in the United States, be more community-based, where we focus on our common ground and really the priority of faith. It's so easy to get just mired down in arguments about things that don't matter, or things that do matter, but they're placed more important than the gospel. So I really enjoyed serving with him and being able to share at that more, he's been a Christian a long time, and just, talk about scripture texts and Bible verses and goofy things that I like, because I like theology. People may not, but I like that about the military. You go to a Christian service.
Yeah, because if you didn't know, like chaplains in the Army, they're called communities. They're not necessarily called by denomination. So I bet you had to deal with some wide arranging. Like, what are some of the services that you happened at Camp Arifjan? Can you name them all?
I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
Well, my service happened to be a contemporary, but you're right. You just get assigned. I didn't like say, well, I want to do this or that.
Yeah, you
So
can't say I'm only serving Methodists because, only
no,
Methodists are going to heaven type of thing.
you would never. I mean, sometimes there's a few exceptions. Well, they'll have a special service,
Sure.
but for the most part, they're just Christian, Jewish, Muslim. We had a pagan service. I mean, obviously, I didn't lead that, but there was one. But even that interaction with other faiths, we had an Orthodox Jewish soldier, and it, as a chaplain, my job in the military is to ensure the free exercise of religion. That is the bottom line reason for chaplains in the military. So there was a lot of work I did to help make sure he had what food he needed and all the various ways that he expresses his faith, which for Judaism is very behavioral based. In Christianity, we're a lot more about right belief, where Judaism and Islam are about right practice. So we might, we might say something like, well, we had the right intention about A, B, and C, even though we didn't do the right thing. And Judaism and Islam, it's about doing the right thing. Even if you didn't know or you made a mistake, you're still held accountable for that. So I had a lot of educating to do about how he expresses his faith, and people couldn't understand. And it helped me grow in my own faith. I really grew through that experience of working with him.
What's an example of that growth look like? Because it sounds like what you're saying in a kind of a meta sense is that when you experience someone who's different than you, you get a different perspective.
You absolutely. And I think I've encountered a lot of people who are afraid of people who are different than them. So it's like, don't interact with that. Don't allow this. Don't allow that, instead of understanding. And I think more often than not, it actually reinforces your own beliefs, but you understand them better. And whereas when you're kind of isolating from other people, you tend to just work off assumptions. So, one thing that he Jews, obviously they eat kosher. So if you can imagine trying to eat kosher in a deployed environment, it is not easy.
Oh, I can't imagine.
And a lot of people, what they'll do on a short-term basis is people have MREs, which are these like field meals that they come in a bag and they're processed, and
they're horrible. You can say it.
They are. So you could do that for a week or a month, but for 11 months, that's a long time.
That's a really long time.
So I had to work out a way where he could get kosher food from the dining facility before they cooked it. And as it turns out, a lot of food is kosher. I didn't know that. If you look on any kind of food in the store, they have little like symbols, like a little circle with a K. It's on all the food. And a lot of food is that way. So I realized, wow, we have a lot of kosher food. If we could just let him have it before and cook his own food, he could live better. And that was an education process. But for my own faith, I was inspired by the way everything that he did was how he ate, what he did at certain times, his rest and work schedules was very intentional, more so than I ever experienced in Christianity. I eat food to enjoy it and eat. I don't think about my faith through what I'm eating. I'm not good at keeping Sabbaths. All of that led me to be more intentional in my own faith in ways that I could be. Now, I don't want to be, legalistic about it, but
sure.
There's an opportunity to grow. So I appreciated getting to know him. And
do you think did you guys end up becoming friends through this process? I mean, it sounds like you had to work pretty closely with him.
Oh, we did. Yes. I became really good friends with him, as well as his supervisor, who was agnostic. So imagine that, and he's got to.
That sounds like a perfect joke.
It was.
A Methodist pastor, an agnostic, and an Orthodox Jew walk into the dining facility.
It was. And his supervisor was a very compassionate man, but, he could not understand all these things that his soldier had to do. And anyway, it was some really good conversation about faith and how we experience it.
That's awesome. So, as we kind of look at this lens of faith, what do you think? Were there any themes that God showed you throughout your deployment, or kind of any way that God spoke in a way that maybe impacted you?
Well, I think I'm still processing, all of that. I think the great thing about faith is it's a journey, and you learn as you go, and you get little pieces as you go. So, coming back, I appreciate my family. I appreciate being back in my church and the people that loved us all through 11 months of deployment. There's ladies that brought my husband food every week just because they thought he should have that. And being able to celebrate the community experience around this deployment, which was never just about me. So I'm humbled.
Yeah, what is that? I mean, the community experience, it was never about you. Is that your church? What does that look like?
Well, I think it affects a lot of people. I mean, I'm the one that deployed, but, my family had to rise to the occasion. The church, they, sometimes my husband would have to leave early to pick up the girls or do something because he's a single dad. So they had impacts. The school that did special things for my daughters. It affects a lot of people in big and small ways. And I think that that's important to recognize. War is a terrible thing, but if we feel like it's only about whoever goes over there or whoever is on the decision making about what we do or don't do, it really has to be about community, both for healing and for strength. So I celebrate that. I don't think that it's always been like that, but in this experience, I really experienced the strength of community. So I hope that we all have time and space to celebrate all those big and small ways people contributed.
I love that. Do you think when you look at the lives of most of the soldiers that you interacted with while you were deployed, how would you characterize their ability to balance faith and life in the deployment? I mean, obviously it helps a little bit that you work in the field of ministry. For that normal, young sergeant or young E4 who's working in the supply shop or the maintenance shop, how does that look for them if they're a person of faith?
Well, I think they have opportunity to really deepen their faith if they take it. I can tell you in 2005, that was a lot more, a lot of people were dying. A lot of people were under a lot of combat stress. So it was a lot more to the forefront. Now people were just working and there wasn't as much danger where I was. I mean, it's different in every place, but it was easier to kind of slide back into that. And especially if you're working 12 hours, do you want to take some time to go to chapel? Maybe not. And I think no matter where we are in life, we're going to go through hard times where our faith becomes really that survival, that life thing that, we grab on because we're just desperate. But it's also, we have to make those intentional decisions when we don't feel desperate, because that's when we grow, and that's when we really make it a part of our everyday life, and where it has that deep, deep meaning in our life beyond just, I don't know how I survived that terrible thing, but I got through. That's the beauty of it. If we can make time for it and make it a part of everything that goes on in our day.
That makes a lot of sense to me, that basically we're all faced with these big things that require our attention. And here, as much as it is when they're deployed, each of us have a choice to decide how we're going to intentionally be in a relationship with God, in a relationship with the community that we're called to be a part of. That's I think that's really relevant for many of us today. Now that you're back and you look at people's lack of intentionality, what feelings does that stir up for you?
Well, I think people's lack of intentionality, just a lot of it comes from just the pressures, and it's so easy to give in to the pressures that don't really have a lot of long-term meaning in our life. And so I don't think people want to be unintentional. It's just hard to be. But I guess what I would say is, it's almost like exercise, how everybody does the big New Year's resolution to be like, Mr. Universe or Miss, superhero on the
Six-pack
gym.
abs by the summer.
That's right. But sometimes you just got to start small and not give in to all the guilt trips of, oh, I didn't do anything. Well, if you didn't do anything, do 10 minutes of something. And that's where you find the progress, not in the big highs and lows. Just, some days you don't have time. Well, end your day with a prayer and try to improve every day. Try to add in. Or if you're struggling with something, try a new form. It can be exciting and give you some more of that motivation that you might be missing. So if you're struggling to read your Bible every day, listen to it on your app on the way to work, or decide to have a conversation about a topic with somebody you trust. There's a lot of opportunities if we can be open to that, and instead of being legalistic on one hand or just defeatism on the other hand. Well, I'm never going to do it, so why try?
Right. It's not all or nothing. It can be somewhere in the middle.
It can.
So how is your rhythm now that you're back in terms of your walk with Christ? What's that look like in a practical sense? Because you're not getting your mile walk in. You're not.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's just different, right? Everything comes back, and your house has changed, but you feel like you left it a certain way. It should still be the same. I mean, that's all real stuff. How are you dealing with that currently? How would you tell a soldier to deal with that if they came in and said, "Ma'am, it's just not working for me"?
Well, that's where the community comes in. You talk about it. And if you're really struggling, you go find a counselor. And there's so many resources out there. The problems can be dealt with when we find someone to walk with us. The more and more we isolate, the harder it is to deal with struggles that we have in our life. And it actually gives them more power, because it's just like us and them, instead of having that community around us to strengthen us, and having, being able to hear God's voice. I think God is always speaking to us, but we're so distracted it's hard to hear a lot of the times. And I've tried to make time out to go see the sunrise or see the sunset, or if I can't walk, do something like that. Take a moment to enjoy something beautiful. I'm very attuned to that now, since I didn't experience that for all that time in Kuwait. It's very, just brown desert sand.
It's the worst. I mean, the people are nice, but it's one of the worst places in terms of geography. Like, there's just nothing.
That's true. There's very little to find beautiful there. But in fact, I remember like a week back, I was pumping my gas one day, and all of a sudden I was totally distracted by all these birds that were on a wire. There was a whole bunch of different kind of birds singing. And I hadn't heard that in so long that I just had to stand there for a minute and listen to it. I'd probably, give me 6 months back, I might not even hear those birds singing, because I kind of tune them out into the focus of, pumping my gas or doing whatever I'm doing. So I'm trying to keep that, hear those things that come in every day, and maybe I've taken for granted.
No, I love that. I think a lot of us take the little things for granted, and it's so easy to be distracted by the task that we lose the sight of the big picture. So you've been doing this for 21 years. You're 20 years married, 3 kids. If you could go back and talk to young Lieutenant Terri Jones, what would you tell her? What's the piece of advice that you wish that you had when you started out?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that question. That's a hard one. I think the best thing is that I would tell myself to just trust God more. And I worried about a lot of things, especially when we were starting out and you don't have a lot of things. And there was a lot of things I worried about that never came to be or didn't come the way I thought that they would. And even the things that were really hard and sad, there was these gifts of grace and suffering that today are some of the most precious things that I've experienced in life. I mean, I don't want to go through that bad experience again, but those deep moments are very precious. So that gives me the ability to hopefully trust God more and release a little bit some of my anxiety about things I don't understand or what the future is. He has it all in his hands, and the things that I won't ever understand, I can still see his hand in my life and giving me care.
I love that. That's a great answer. Grace and suffering. So just as a little bonus question, because I like to keep people guessing, what's your favorite memory from our time deployed together? Because we were deployed together from 04 to 05 in Kuwait. It was one of the best, worst years of my life. I don't know how to describe it other than that. I think a lot of people would describe deployments that way, but I'm always, and I still keep up with most everybody from the group, the four of us, the core four of us. What was your favorite memory from our deployment, 04 to 05? Your favorite story?
Well, my favorite time, which is funny, I must have this like exercise theme or something, because you had made it one of your goals to get more fit.
Yeah.
So
I lost 50 pounds that year.
That was a lot.
That's a lot. I lost a person.
So we spent a lot of time walking around this, or running, whatever, around this disgusting track that was like outside of some manufacturing plant, and like
it was a mile track though, which was beautiful.
It was. But I remember just going, mile after mile, but while we did it, we would talk and laugh and discuss. One time you guys were discussing about having a baby shower or something. I don't know. I remember the beauty of that community and taking a space out from the work we were doing, which sometimes was exciting, sometimes it was boring, and just discussing what was ever on our minds in a place that really had no beauty in it except for whatever we put there. So that was my best memory.
I think I would echo that sentiment in terms of the time that we spent on the track. I have never laughed so hard in my life as I have on that track. And I think it was partly just exhaustion and partly just, pure kind of love in that community type of sense. Mm-hmm. And then my close second favorite would be our Sunday morning routine. I don't know if you remember it or not, but at the Green Bean. So Sunday mornings in the Army, all the chaplains have to get ready and they all do different services. And so our section, our little unit, our little family would get together and we'd have coffee, and I would drink this Frappuccino that was really just sugar with a little bit of coffee sprinkled in. And you wonder why I had to lose 50 pounds. But we would sit around there and we would talk about how God was working in the community. And those are some favorite of my memories as well.
They were good. They were
good. And now look at you, y'all grown up, Lieutenant Colonel.
Yeah, I was just barely in the Army then.
You were a young captain. That's okay. I was Catholic. None of us had kids. Like, it was way different. It was a way different world.
But look, we're still friends.
We're still friends. I think that is the benefit of intentional community. It's just a beautiful thing.
It allows people to grow and change and still be community.
Yeah, and I went out to California and saw our dear friend John Barrow out there, and it was he didn't remember any of those stories. He couldn't remember anything. But mostly because I think he was like, I don't remember that at all. I was like, John, you said it. But that was him. That was him. So let me ask you this, Terri, if any of our listeners wanted to follow up with you or find you on the internet, is there an easy way to do that?
Sure. They can just email me. I don't have a blog right now, but
you are a pretty incredible writer. You did blog for a couple of years, didn't you?
Just while I was deployed, but anyway, I'll probably get back at it after my hiatus.
That's good. It's a gift. It's a gift to the world. So if they wanted to email you, what's your good email address?
My email is Terri, Terri, Pruitt, Pruitt, Jones @yahoo.com.
Perfect. And we'll put a note in there in the show notes so that if anybody wants to follow up or if they have questions or want to know how they can support troops, that's something that you can help them with too, right?
Anytime. That's right.
Anytime. I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for your service. I always, true confession, felt a little jealous that I wasn't going back over there with you.
Oh, I would have loved that.
That would have been so much fun. But also grateful that you were there to answer the call and help those soldiers. So thank you, and Richard and the girls, for all of your service.
Oh, you're welcome. I have one final story. I just want to.
I love it.
I was reminded of it. There's a city in Iraq that was one of the up and coming cities. It's called Erbil, and after the recovery from the initial Iraq war, they were building, and it was going to be the next Dubai. So there's cranes all over the skyline. There's probably like 5 to 10 cranes you can see there. But when ISIS swept through Iraq in 2014, or is it 16? Anyway, I got to check that. But all the work came to a halt. They stopped building, but still those cranes are just sitting there. They never lifted anything. So when I go through in 2018, there's the cranes that are now part of the skyline trying to build this great thing that didn't ever happen. I would see that and think about in our life how often we get distracted. We have these great purposes and plans, and they just seem like they get on hold. But God always has a purpose and plan, and he never gives up on us. So my verse for that was that he who began a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. And we have true confidence in his constant work in our life, and he hasn't given up on us.
Amen. Thank you for that. I'm going to carry that all day, I think.
Okay.
Hey, friends, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our conversation with Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel Terri Jones. I realize that it takes time to listen wherever you are, gym, home, work, car, whatever. Thank you. Just thank you for, making us a part of your day. Our next conversation, you're going to love it. It's with Christian entrepreneur Mike Mattill. Mike is a professional baseball player turned businessman whose family has a tremendous impact on the Dayton area. He shares his thoughts on faith, life, religiosity, and spirituality. It's a great conversation. The only way to make sure that you don't miss it, subscribe wherever it is you listen to podcasts. Also, if you've left a review, thank you so much. It really means a lot. We really appreciate them. I read them all. And you can also always get caught up on anything that you've missed at twmilt.com.
Like what you heard? Please take a minute to rate and share so others like you can find good practices for faith and life.